Now it's time for REST. No, it's time to understand how REST actually works. Let's learn about it. Again, it's a little bit theory again, understand, but we would see a demo very soon. REST API is the full form is representational state transfer, is a style of software architecture for distributed hypermedia systems. Again, any application needs to have its REST API for it to be allowing the other applications to interact with. So we would, if Salesforce now has created REST API so that other people can interact, other third-party applications can interact with Salesforce. So REST API is lightweight, as I already mentioned, because it uses JSON most of the times. Lightweight request and response framework. It's easy to use. It has powerful web services based on RESTful principles, because it's taken over SOAP was web services API, or SOAP was used originally like long time before, but in 97, I think, if I'm getting the year correct, when the REST API started picking up, and it came in, and then it started picking up. Now every application is using REST as one of the one of the ways to interact with each, which internally. So you can expose any functionality via REST resources and HTTP methods. It would use HTTP methods in the underlying messaging system. It would allow you to do any create, read, update, or delete. You can search or query a data. You can retrieve object metadata and access information about limits in your org. You can through REST API of Salesforce, we can get all the limits inside Salesforce org. It supports both XML and JSON. It's mainly used in our mobile and web apps. Salesforce SDK would be interacting. So if you just go to a Salesforce SDK app, Salesforce app, and try to get something, like if you're trying to store a case or something in the backend, it's using REST API to store. And if you write custom logic using Salesforce SDK, sharing the data, sending the data to Salesforce, you would always do it through REST API, because it's lightweight. Your app can support, your mobile can support. REST resources is referenced using a URI. You would use a URL, which you saw when I was talking to the Google API. I use a URL, and the information is hidden via the HTTP methods. We will see that in a demo very soon. So let's say we have a booking platform. It would create or update individual records or multiple records using using through the REST API. Okay. So in short, REST, it's best suited for browser or mobile applications which do not need access to high amount of records. Then it uses XML or JSON. It's synchronous, and it's authenticated with OAuth 2.0 using connected app, which we'll be seeing in a demo soon. What are the HTTP methods? I mentioned it uses HTTP methods. What HTTP methods it's using? Let's look at them. Head, again, to retrieve the resource metadata, but get is very, very famous. Just now when I went to the browser, when I put in the URL and I just press enter, it was a get request. It was just a read. We are retrieving the records from the YouTube's database, getting the statistics for the channel. It's just a get request. But post is something when you're creating with new records. Patch, we need to update some records or update some specific fields inside record. We would pass that ID and all that inside that request. Then put, again, upsert. If it's already upsert is nothing but insert or update. If it's not there, then it would insert. If it's not, if it's present, it would just update. So update existing or create records, and delete we would use to delete the records. In the demo, it will be very clear how to use all these methods when we are calling the Salesforce's Apex Fest or Salesforce REST APIs. But when I told you about all these things, HTTP, but how we would interpret inside Salesforce all these things? HTTP, okay, fine, I get it, HTTP mechanism, but how do we write an HTTP request? How do we get an HTTP response? We are given 3 classes to perform these callouts, and also a JSON class, which I just now showed you. That JSON class is being given by Salesforce to serialize and deserialize. But Salesforce gives you three classes. Let me show you those three classes. HTTP requests is a class which is allowing us to do any call out requests like get, post, put, delete. Okay, we can create HTTP requests like get, post, put, delete using this class, and they are showing, giving an example. We will also be seeing an example, and it is providing various constructor methods, get body, get endpoint, set endpoint, and all those methods it's giving. Okay, so you can read about it more. It also has a class called HTTP response. When a response comes, we need to get the status message, we need to get the body of the response. So all that is through various methods which this class provides. Okay, request will give us the endpoint method, set method, then response, we would interpret the response which came in. So these are the response methods which are available. And then again, the basic, it starts with an HTTP class. So we also have an HTTP class. So HTTP class will help you to send the requests to via HTTP. So it's in the backend, it's using that HTTP protocol, but it's using through HTTP class. So these are the three classes which Salesforce has given us to interact with the third-party APIs over HTTP. And if I want to access the REST API of any third-party application, like let's say Twitter, I would use these classes to create my request and interpret my response. Okay. Now time comes for the demo. So there are multiple things part of this big demo. So today the demo is we understood how we get a JSON and then how we would create a Apex class from that JSON. Now, when this is a demo for a third-party callout, we are calling a third-party application's REST API. Okay, so now which is the application? The application is YouTube. Okay, so first we need to read about YouTube's API. What does the API need in the request and how it would send the response? So let me jump on to the API, the data API, which we are trying to interact. It also gives you a good small demo. This application, we can run a demo. We can try the API here itself. We can give the channel ID and it sends the response right away. But as I said, it would need an authentication mechanism. Any interaction with any API needs to be authenticated. Right now, I am logged in using my Gmail account. I have created an account inside Google and Google's APIs, and I have created a project and I have an API key which I'm using in my demo. That's why I'm able to interact with the Google API. Without all these things, I would not be able to talk to Google API. It needs an API key. An API key comes from your account. You need to set up an account in the Google API as a project. You would and you have to have an API key, and that API key we would be using in our demo, so that it would be able to know that it's coming from a trusted user, and it would be able to give the data out of the database. If it was not trusted, it would not give the response. So this is the API guide, the way we have Salesforce's REST API guide. This is YouTube's API guide, and it's telling us what are the use cases and what are the request parameters, what are the ways get request works, the post request works, and what are the inputs and what are the outputs it would give. Okay, so in short, we send the request in terms of a get request, and that get request, what was it? I'll show you. And it gave me a response, and the response was this. So all that is mentioned in this guide. So any APIs, when we're creating, we need to create a guide because we need to let people know how to use that API. What are the request parameters, what are the response parameters. So that's how each application would, even Salesforce has a REST API guide, and a SOAP API guide. So we would look at it tomorrow in our proper demos. Today is a demo. We are calling the third-party API. So we have to create a remote site setting. Why? Let's look at it, why we need to create that. So as I was saying, when we are doing an outbound integration, we need to let Salesforce know that we are going to call this API, which is a Google API, okay, and it's trusted. If we are doing any random call, it would not allow us to call. Let's see it demo. Right now, it's being created. So how do we create a remote site setting? Is that we go to setup and we just go and create new remote site setting. We put in the name, whatever name you want to put in, you put in the URL and then put in the description and then keep it active. Now I'm just deactivating this remote site setting, and I'm gonna show a demo and see if it's gonna work without this remote site setting. So first you need to, if you're calling a third-party API, first you need a remote site setting. That's the first checklist item. You need to check it out of your checklist. Second, let's look at the code. I'll just show you the code. And again, I talked about authentication. We authenticated. We are calling the third-party API, which is Google API, using an API key. This is a very key thing. Without API key, I would not be able to talk to the Google's API. I'll run the example now. So what tools we're going to use? We're going to use a developer console to run the demo, but you can use that complete code into an Apex class. I've also created Apex class for that. I'll show you that. So you can put that complete code inside Apex class, and you can call that via process builder. You can invoke a class, or you can call it via flows. You can have configuration created on top of it to call the customization, to call the custom code, or you can directly call through Visualforce page, or you can call these through the Lightning component. We can call those classes. So let's look at the code here. I've written the code here. Okay. So this is the code which we're going to run in our developer console. This is the HTTP. As I told you, it starts with an HTTP initialization for an HTTP class, and we create a HTTP object, and then there's a request. We would set the endpoint. I told you we are calling the Google API, so the endpoint is nothing but our Google API. So we put in that URL, and each HTTP request has to have a URL, and this is the URL. So let's little bit understand what is the URL contain. Okay, so that you not get confused. This URL contains the calling. We are calling the Google API, and it's a YouTube API. So, and it's a version 3. They have given this, and we are calling the channels endpoint, because we need to get the data for a channel, which is Apex hours. And these are some parameters which they want in the request. And so we're trying to get the content details, statistics, and snippet out of it. And ID is nothing but the channel ID. So this is the channel ID of our Apex hours. And you would get that when you go to the YouTube, any channel, you can get the channel ID on the URL. This is the key I told you. Without this key, I would not be able to call the Google API. Okay, it knows that it's coming from a authenticated user, because it's using my account, Gmail account, to as a OAuth mechanism first to understand, okay, this is coming from JS's Gmail account. It would know that, it would keep a track, and it would also give me in the dashboard, okay, someone called, and it would tell me, okay, how many hits for that endpoint were done from outside. So it would give me all the statistics also. So definitely it needs a key. And the set method, we are doing a get request, because we need to just get the data. We're not updating anything inside Google's database. And this is a response, HTTP response class, which we have written. And we are sending a request, which we have just created here. And once the response comes in, we have to see if the status code is 200. Then only we can proceed. We get a response as, so there are various error messages which come, and they would come up with the 401, 404, 400 status codes. So if that is the one, then we would know it's failed. So we need to have the code written for that also. So you need to know which are the error messages which come back, and then handle those error messages accordingly. So when the response comes, we get a body, and that we can print it out in our debug statement and see what is the body, which we saw already in the browser. And I'm using here the YouTube's API class, which I told you I have created a wrapper class. That class was created from the JSON which I got from hitting the URL. And that JSON I converted into Apex, and I'm using that. And I'm calling the pass method, which I showed you. That pass method, I just need to pass the JSON in the string format. The response body is completely JSON, and the JSON is in the string format. I'm just passing it, and it's returning me the result in terms of the object of YouTube API class, that class which I already showed you. And then I could just get whatever data I need, and I can print it. But there is also another way we can interpret this JSON. And if we are not using this wrapper class, we could use the JSON class which Salesforce has given, and we can JSON.deserialize untyped is a method which I'm using. I'm getting all the body, passing the body and getting all the data, and it's giving me the result in a map format. It's a collection. It would store all that data into a map, and then from that map, using the key value, I can get the data out. So the key is, one of the key which you had seen was items. It would contain items, the response. So I would get the items out of it. And then item was nothing but a list of array which we had seen because it had square brackets. So that's why we have created a list object, and then we would traverse with our list, and from that items, I need the child items. One of the child item we need is statistics. So I'm getting the statistics. I'm typecasting this again item into a map, which is map of child items, because each object is nothing but a map of key value. You need to have a key value map. So this is the key value map, and then I'm getting the value, the key, passing the key which is statistics, and getting the value out of it. So that's how I can write with the using the wrapper class or without wrapper class. Here I need to write the code, but wrapper class makes it easy for me. I don't have to do anything. So these are two ways which I showed you. Let us run this demo in our developer console. So the YouTube API class which we have written, and this is nothing but it's parsing. When we pass a JSON, it would use system.json.deserialize, and we have passed the JSON, and it would use the class. It accepts two parameters, the JSON, and then we would give the class name in which it needs to create the object for or deserialize into, and then the format would be this class. So it would deserialize it into this format, and I could read each and every element out of that object. So let's run the demo in our developer console, but I also have a Apex class for it. So now, so how would you go to developer console? You always know that we need to go to setup, and then we need to click on the developer console, and we would be on the developer console. So let's just close all the tabs, and we would, if you want to run anything, we use the anonymous window. You would know about this. Anonymous window helps us to run any code without going and running or interacting inside the UI. So this is the exact code which I showed you, which I have written in that VS Code I showed you, that this is the exact code. Let's just run it, and then we see what are the responses. As I told you, I had made the remote site settings inactive, so it doesn't know that it's a secure callout, and it gave me
Hey Jayesh, you still there? We can't hear you.
We are able to see your screen, but not able to hear you.
Right. Hey guys, looks like Jayesh is experiencing some technical glitch. He's just trying to sort that out. So please be patient and apologies for that.
Headset died on me. So really sorry for that. Coming to the demo again, guys. So sorry for this break. So as we ran the code, it gave us an error, and this was this called exception. So why this came in? Because we had turned off the remote site setting, and that the remote site setting, we just need to go and make it active. As I told you, without that, it would not know. What was the error? It was a caller exception. So whenever you get this, you need to know that it's not authenticated. That's why, or it's not secured. That's why Salesforce is not allowing you to talk to any third-party API, a third-party website. So when I now run this code, it runs successfully. Okay. So let's see what all things it is coming back with. As I told you, we have printed this response, statistics response, which you know already what statistics it's sending. But if I want to see the response which came in from Salesforce, let's see that. Sorry, from the YouTube. It's a JSON response. So, okay, so this is a JSON. If it's printing that, if you see, which I told you already, this is a JSON it's sending, and it's a response which is coming. Now need to interpret this. So that's why we wrote the code to typecast it into the YouTube API wrapper class. And when I typecasted it, and I was able to print the statistics exactly out of that class, how I use the object and then printed the statistics out of it. But if I had used the generic code, not the YouTube API class, then I would use this method and I would just print the statistics out of it, and this would be coming out of it, which is again statistics. So you understood that we call the third-party API, we got the response, and the response was interpreted in two ways. We use JSON's JSON to Apex class, or we use directly the classes of Salesforce, which Salesforce gives, which is a JSON class. So now this was possible. Again, I told you with the authentication. Without authentication, I would not be able to call the Google API class. Okay, so this was our demo. We covered remote site settings, we covered the code, we covered the API which we used, the guide. Then it was done using API key. We ran the code in the developer console, and again the tools which we use this developer console. I could have used the Postman tool also, and I could have ran this request, and I would have got the response in the Postman tool. I could use other tools like curl. So you could use these tools to understand. You can call the third party APIs, or call REST APIs or SOAP APIs. So let's look at a checklist, and we would again see in the end of the day 2 session what are the checklist, what all things we have to cover when it comes to integration. There are 2 types of integration, again, outbound and inbound. Each integration needs authentication. Without authentication, you cannot request any application. If it's Salesforce, if it's an inbound, it would still need to authenticate using a username and password. If it's outbound, again, it would need some authentication mechanism. When it's outbound, we need to have remote site settings created, which we already saw. Name, credentials, we will be learning about them later. But then we decided we ought to use API, which is REST API, also API. We decided in today's demo we saw REST API. Then we use a HTTP methods, which is the method which we use, which was a get method. We need to know which is gets, post, put, patch, delete, any method. Then what is the format which we need to send the request and receive the request. If it's a post request, we would need to send a JSON request, and if it's a response would come in again in JSON. So that is a JSON or XML. Do we need to use configuration, or we need to use Apex? So if it's an outbound message, we would use configuration. If it's a custom call, then we would use Apex. So today we saw Apex demo. Then if it's a push or pull, push is nothing but we're pushing some data outside Salesforce to some other application. We want to tell that application that we have a new account, new lead, new contact. Pull, we need to retrieve the data from third party, like we're getting the data out of the third party application. Like today we saw YouTube, we called the YouTube API, we got the data out of it. So it's a pull mechanism. Salesforce is a consumer in outbound. Consumer is nothing but we are consuming someone's service. So that's why Salesforce has become consumer today in the demo today. Inbound, it would contain, again, authentication, connected app. We would be seeing that demo tomorrow, connected app. Then credentials would be needed from the connected app. Then we would need, again, which API we are interacting with when it comes to Salesforce. It's a Salesforce REST API, Salesforce SOAP API. It's a JSON request or a JSON response, XML or XML request or XML response using WSDL. Then it was a standard or custom, as I told you, standard REST API or Apex REST API or a so that's how we would know. We would again see that in detail tomorrow. Are we using Apex? Are we using configuration? Again, are we using push or pull? We are pushing the data inside Salesforce or retrieving data outside Salesforce. And then Salesforce is subscriber. Salesforce and someone else is consuming the services of Salesforce. That's why it's Salesforce is a subscriber. What are the resources which you can learn more? You can learn from Lightning Platform API Basics or Apex Integration Services. Again, these are the two modules which really will give you more about. You can learn more about it from these modules in Trailhead. But as I told you, Apex Developer Guide is really extensive. You can go read from there if you want more knowledge, and you can get things out of it. So what is the demo for today? And I have tested this, it works. So definitely this demo can be, it can be achieved. I can also show you a little bit, but this is an assignment for you guys. If you complete this assignment, again, you have various incentives, which Apex Hours is running. You'll get certification vouchers and things like that. So don't miss out on this assignment. And it's very easy. I have done it. It just will take you 1 hour, maybe maximum. You need to call a third-party API, which is smartystreets.com is giving us an API, US Street API. So we need to verify that the address which we are providing to the API is correct, and the response would be okay, and it would give you the exact location. And then we would have to store this verified on an event record. So we could, you need, the must have is that you need to have error handling as part of this code, error handling and code reusability. You need to have the code written in such it can be reused, and error handling needs to be done in this. Okay. Let me just show you this API so that people are aware and what all things you need to do as part of the assignment. Okay. So just so that it's seen that it's working. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Okay. Yeah. So this is the USD API which we are going to call, and it expects. This is again a demo over here. Or they're showing you a demo also that if you pass on this address and view API response, and the response would come 200 okay, and this would be a response, and this would be a JSON which you will be getting. So it's very easy. You can call the API and get the response. It has get and post, sorry. And you need to for calling this API, you need to have account like we did for Google, because it needs to be authenticated. So you need to create an account, sign up for this. You would get the API authentication ID and token. Once you have the authentication ID and token, you need to use the parameters. How would you pass the parameters? You would use Visualforce page or some input or some record. Let's say event record. You would pass that data from those fields on some action, you would call the backend third party, so Apex code which you have written. So I had written that. Let me just show you that code which I had written today, the REST demo class. So you would write a class like this, which I ran in developer console. You would write a class like this. You would have a method which would be called, which would be passing some parameter, and then you would calling the API, getting the response and all that. And then if you're calling from trigger, you would use the future callout equals to true. If you're calling from Visual Force page or Lightning or from some record or from process builder, from flow or process builder, it doesn't need anything. No annotation of future. So that's the assignment for today, guys. I think we are running out of time again already. So please try to attempt this. It's easy. It's not going to be very difficult. It'll give you a clarity of how to use the REST API of any application. All right. So thank you. I would end here. Again, sorry for the glitch which happened in 2 minutes or something back. If any questions, please, you can proceed.
So Jayesh, thank you for that exhaustive introduction on the capabilities of the Salesforce platform to integrate and talk to other systems and applications and services. I think there are quite a few questions. We'll just try to cover some of them. So there is a question which says, are these open APIs? I think the question is with reference to the API the Smarty Streets API that we were showcasing. So is that one an open API? And second, do you need any kind of authentication? And if yes, how can everybody trying to use that API get that?
Yes, as I was saying, the Smarty Streets API is nothing but you need to create a account here. I have created my account. It needs to authenticate. Without authentication, it would not work. It would give you API keys, and the best part is it's giving us 255 calls free, so we don't have to pay any money. So the sign up is free. It will give you the keys, and the keys are here, the authentication ID and authentication token. So we would use that as one of the ways to interact with. So again, I don't want to disclose the complete assignment, but it's very easy to sign up and see this. I have signed up, and without that, we would not be able to talk to this API. Hope I answered the question, Jigar.
Hey, Jayesh, this is really great session. And guys, like we uploaded most of the recording, so you can look into that. And yeah, definitely new recording will become one by one. I will request everyone to subscribe our YouTube channel so that you will get the notification whenever it is uploaded. And top of it, we are also uploading everything like demo code, whatever we are using, slide content and everything on the blog post with the further learning link. Like if you are doing this session, then which all Trailhead module you can do it. I will be highly recommended you everyone to do all those Trailhead module to do further learning. Top of it, that is not part of assignment. Assignment we are posting separately, but it's always recommended. And the main problem people mostly ask me, okay, I want to do the Trailhead model, but don't know what is the sequence, on which sequence I should do it. So we already mentioned everything our blog post. So spend some time on a blog post and do it. And top of it, if we have any other old recording which is we feel which is related to or some advanced topic which you can do it, we are also sharing the recording list over there, so you can go through those one as well. Thank you, Jayesh and Jigar.
Thanks for that, Amit. I think we'll take one more question probably and then call it a day, right? So I'm just sniffing through. I think there was a general, so there is a question which says, why OAuth authentication is post method to get access token from Salesforce? So I think if you could just explain, Jayesh, explain the difference between, the different methods. What do they actually mean in terms of get, post, put, patch, and delete? and how they kind of add relevance to your call. Hopefully rest of the areas would become clear.
Absolutely. Let me jump on back to this slide. Again, what is any application needs a mechanism to authenticate. So authentication 2.0 auth is Salesforce's recommended way, and you need to use like it needs to interact only through OAuth 2.0, and without that you cannot. So it would need specific things like we will be seeing that in the demo tomorrow. The connected app, it would need client secret, client key. Without that, first handshake would happen, and then after the handshake has happened, then only you can even do a GET request. It's not going to be without the OAuth. So that is what the first mechanism is. We would look at it a little bit in detail tomorrow. But the methods, get, post, patch, put, delete, they are like get will just get you the request out of it. Again, I'm going to show a demo tomorrow on get, post, also tomorrow when it comes to Salesforce interaction. Today we just did a get demo. So get would just retrieve the data. But again, when it comes to post, you can create records. We would see that in the demo tomorrow. But when it comes to patch, we would update the records there. We would in the put we would upsert, and in delete we would delete the records. We will see demo for each, then you will get more clarity. But OAuth, without OAuth, we'll not be able to do any of these call outs, and we cannot use any HTTP methods without OAuth authentication. So authentication is the key. Without that, nothing would work. Not even a GET request.
Yeah, and just to add to that, my 2 cents on that is basically, these methods that Jayesh is talking about, HTTP methods, are the basic way of communication. It's not something which is very Salesforce specific. Every communication on the internet between two systems using web services is always done using these methods. Think of these methods as simply your methods or actions that can update, manipulate data. So for example, get is when you are retrieving some data, post is when you're creating some data, patch is an update. So they're like your DML operations. The only difference is these operations are performed on a remote system. So these methods are used to tell the remote system what kind of operation is being performed. So when the message is sent from one system to the other system, it has a message format which actually tells or which actually has the method written there. So the other system that's trying to read the message understands that this is a get call, and hence it'll return something, or it will give the resultant what it has been asked for. So basically that is I think you can just do a little bit more reading around how methods operate generally in web communication. If you read a little bit about web communication in general, you will understand how this all works. Okay.
Just highlight here one point. So basically the question was why we need post method in Salesforce while getting the access token. So that we can say that logic behind this is like as JS told, that post method is mainly used to create the data in third-party system. So whenever we are getting the access token, we are actually generating a unique token for every login user into the third-party system, and that token is being returned to us. Then we are storing token in our Salesforce environment, and that token is also being used or also being stored in the third-party environment. So, and after that, once we are making the request, instead of sending the username and password, client ID and client secret, we are sending that unique token, and then system is verifying that if the token is correct, then we are getting the data. So that is the logic behind using the post method instead of using get method for getting the access token. So it is first it is generating the token there in the system and then returning back to us. I think now it is clear.
Okay. All right. So guys, I think that's the last question, unfortunately, that we will be able to take now. But that should not deter you from asking any more questions. please feel free to go and post questions on the website, on the blogs of the Apex Hours, on apexhours.com. That's the URL for our website. We will be more than happy to answer and respond back to your comments or questions. Jayesh, thank you for the session today, and thank you Apex Hours team for being there and trying to responding to the queries that all the attendees were asking. We will be back again with part 2 of today's session. So there is going to be another part to this, and just in order to have continuity, please don't miss out on the session tomorrow and the sessions after that. So thank you. Good night, good day, based on wherever you're located. We look forward to seeing you again in our session tomorrow. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.